A couple in their late 60s showed up at the cruise terminal thinking it would be routine. Same ship, same scooter, same habits. 10 minutes later, they were standing off to the side while everyone else boarded. They never got on the ship. Not because of money, not because of health, because of a rule that didn't exist last time they cruised. If you're over 65, these quiet changes can end your trip before it starts. Today, we're breaking down 8 new cruise rules that are blindsiding seniors in 2026 and exactly how to avoid learning them the hard way. Let's dive. Rule 1. Mobility scooter width is now strictly enforced. Cruise lines now measure mobility scooters at the terminal, not by model name, not what worked last time, but the exact widest point on that specific ship. This first rule is ending cruises before they even begin. If your mobility scooter is too wide, even by a small amount, the cruise line can stop you at the terminal and deny boarding. A woman in her early 70s found this out the hard way earlier this year. She had brought the same personal scooter on multiple cruises with no issues. Same model, same setup, no complaints. This time was different. At check-in, staff measured the widest point of her scooter, not just the base, everything. Armrests, controls, mirrors. The number they got was just over the width of a standard cabin door on that ship. That was it. She was told that because her scooter could not safely pass through the cabin doorway, she should have booked an accessible cabin. Since she hadn't, they would not allow her to board. From her perspective, nothing had changed. From the cruise line's perspective, everything had. Here's the part most people don't realize. Cruise lines tightened these rules after emergency drills showed that oversized scooters were blocking hallways and slowing evacuations. What used to be a gray area is now treated as a safety issue, and safety rules are non-negotiable. The biggest trap here is experience. Seniors assume that if something worked before, it will work again. That assumption is now dangerous, so the work happens at home, not at the port. Before you cruise, you need to physically measure your scooter. Measure the widest point, not what's listed in the brochure. Do the same for wheelchairs and walkers. Then you call the cruise line and ask one specific question. What is the width of a standard cabin door on my ship? If your numbers don't match, you have 2 real options. You either upgrade to an accessible cabin with wider doors and more turning space, or you rent a scooter that already meets the ship's requirements. If you skip this step, the terminal is where you'll find out, and by then, it's too late. The next rule catches even people who measure everything perfectly. Rule 2. Health declaration forms are no longer optional. One of the easiest ways to delay or derail your boarding now has nothing to do with luggage, weather, or flights. It's an email you didn't open. A retired school teacher in her mid-60s booked a long Mediterranean cruise. 2 days before departure, a message arrived from the cruise line asking her to complete a health declaration. She glanced at it, assumed it was another reminder or promotion, and ignored it. At the terminal, her boarding pass triggered a flag in the system. Instead of heading toward the ship, she was escorted to a separate area for medical screening. While other passengers boarded, she sat there answering questions and waiting for clearance from a medical officer who was already overwhelmed. She eventually got on, but she lost hours, missed lunch, and started her vacation stressed and shaken. This is becoming standard practice. Cruise lines are moving toward mandatory health declarations submitted before arrival. These forms usually show up 48 to 72 hours before sailing and ask about symptoms, recent illness, and exposure risks. If you don't complete them ahead of time, the system assumes the worst. And for older passengers, that often means extra scrutiny. The key thing to understand is this: these health forms are not just paperwork anymore. They are tied directly into the check-in system. When you submit the form ahead of time, your booking stays clean. When you don't, your name gets flagged. And once that happens, nobody at the terminal can just wave you through. Here is the simple habit shift. The moment you see an email from your cruise line within 3 days of sailing, you stop and open it. If there is a health form link, you complete it immediately. You don't wait, you don't assume, you submit it and save confirmation. That one move can be the difference between walking straight onto the ship and spending your first cruise day in a plastic chair answering medical questions. You think that's stressful?
Wait until you see what happens if you skip insurance. Rule 3. Medical evacuation insurance is becoming quietly required. A medical evacuation from a cruise ship can cost anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000. This does not apply to every cruise or every company, but it is becoming more common on remote itineraries. Think Alaska, think Antarctica, think long stretches of open water. If you're over 70 and cruising far from major medical centers, some lines now expect evacuation coverage before check-in is complete. This catches people off guard because it didn't exist last time they cruised. Now it does.
Rule 4. Mobility aid battery rules have tightened. This rule catches people right alongside the scooter width problem. Even if your mobility scooter fits through the cabin door, the battery inside it can still stop you from boarding. Cruise lines have become much stricter about what types of batteries they allow on board. Lithium batteries in particular are under heavy scrutiny. Some ships only allow sealed, non-spillable batteries. Others limit the size or watt-hours of lithium units, and these limits are not the same across every cruise line. The trap here is familiarity. Seniors bring the same scooter they've used for years and assume it will be fine. Then security asks about the battery. If the staff cannot verify that the battery meets ship standards, they can delay boarding or deny it completely. This is happening more often because fire safety rules have tightened across the industry. Batteries are now treated as a risk factor, not just a mobility aid. Before you cruise, you don't just measure the scooter, you check the battery type. You look up the battery specifications, you call the cruise line and confirm that your specific battery is allowed on your ship. If you rent a scooter from an approved vendor, this problem usually disappears. Bring your own, and the responsibility is yours. And this is where I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen someone stopped at the terminal over paperwork, mobility gear, or a rule nobody warned them about? Drop it in the comments. And speaking of surprises, some rules actually save you money, like this next one. Rule 5. Senior drink package discounts exist, but you have to ask. Not every rule costs you money. Some quietly save it. A couple in their late 60s discovered this by accident. They called their cruise line's loyalty department with a basic question about their loyalty status. During the call, the agent mentioned a reduced price on drink packages tied to their age and loyalty history. There was no banner on the website, no email promotion, no notice in their account. By the end of the call, their total bill dropped by several $100s. Cruise lines use internal discount codes that never appear online. On some cruise lines, older passengers are one of those groups. The catch is that only loyalty agents can see these offers. Regular reservation agents usually cannot, and the discounts tend to appear in a short window, often between 30 and 60 days before sailing. The move is simple but specific. About 6 weeks before your cruise, call the loyalty department and say, "I'm over 65 and a loyalty member. Are there any current offers for older guests on drink packages for my sailing?" That one sentence can put real money back in your pocket. Now, while money is nice, here's a health perk most seniors miss. Rule 6. A free medical consultation exists, but only if you ask early. On a cruise ship, almost nothing is more expensive than visiting the medical center. That's why this next policy surprises so many older guests. On some cruise lines and sailings, passengers 65 and older may be able to request a complimentary introductory medical check-in during the first day. This is not guaranteed, not advertised, and depends entirely on the ship, staffing, and itinerary. Most people never hear about it. The reason is simple. The medical staff is busy. They don't advertise this perk, they don't announce it, and they won't come knocking on your door. You have to ask. And timing matters. When it is offered, it's usually limited to the first 24 hours after boarding. Miss that window, and the consultation is no longer free. The game changer: once you board, drop your bags, take a breath, and head to guest services. You say something like this: "I'm over 65 and I'd like to request a complimentary medical consultation if that's available on this sailing." Sometimes it's a quick check-in, sometimes it's a longer conversation. Either way, it gives you a baseline and peace of mind early in the trip. Quick, easy, gives peace of mind. And if you think boarding lines are unavoidable, the next rule proves otherwise.
Rule 7. Priority boarding is available for seniors, but it's quiet. I've seen seniors stand in boarding lines for over an hour when they didn't have to, simply because they didn't know this option existed. If you've ever stood in a long boarding line watching the minutes crawl by, you know how draining it can be. What many seniors don't realize is that they often don't have to stand there. Most ships have procedures to assist older or less mobile guests during embarkation. They just don't advertise them. Why? Because if everyone requested priority boarding, the system would collapse. But when seniors ask calmly and clearly for help, staff usually accommodate them. You walk up to the desk and say, "I'm over 65 and standing for long periods is hard on my knees. Is there a way to make boarding easier today?" This isn't a formal entitlement. It depends on the terminal and staff's discretion. Before the final rule, the one that can completely derail your cruise, make sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss more inside info on this. Rule 8. Passport validity rules are stricter than ever. Many experienced cruisers assume that if their passport worked before, it will work again. That assumption can be costly. Even on cruises that used to allow expired or short-term passports, so-called closed-loop itineraries, lines are now enforcing stricter validity requirements. Some ships now require your passport to be valid for at least 6 months beyond your return date. The problem is, these rules aren't always obvious until you reach the terminal. Suddenly, what you thought was a minor technicality can prevent you from boarding entirely. The lesson? Double-check your passport well in advance. Don't rely on past experience or old habits. Even a few weeks' difference can mean missing your trip. By now, you have a very different picture of what cruising looks like in 2026 for seniors. You know which rules have changed. You know which perks exist quietly. You know exactly how to protect yourself and even save money along the way. But there's more on the horizon. Cruise lines are testing new senior-focused perks, like quiet lounges reserved for older guests during certain hours, priority access to dinner reservations, loyalty rewards that increase with age as well as cruise nights. The key takeaway is simple. Cruising isn't less enjoyable as you age, it's just different. Those who understand the new rules, ask for their rights, and plan ahead get smoother, safer, and even cheaper vacations. If you apply these steps, the pier won't be a place of frustration. It will be the starting line of the trip you've been looking forward to for months or even years.